Welcome back, everybody. For today's deep dive, we're looking at something, well, something pretty intense.
Yeah, this one landed in our inbox and it really caught our eye.
So one of you, our listeners, sent us this YouTube video.
From the Last Days channel.
Right, Last Days, and the title is, get this, quote, "The Lord showed me the start of WW3.
Now you got to admit that's a headline that kind of grabs you.
It really does, but what we want to do today, instead of getting caught up in all that, that sensationalism.
We're going to dive deep into what this video actually says.
Exactly. Like, what are the ideas here? What's the message? What are the themes that come out of this?
Think of us as, your guides through this very particular perspective.
Exactly. And the fact that you sent us this, right, our listener, it tells us that you're thinking about these things.
And we want to try and kind of unpack this in a structured way.
Yeah, like we're extracting the key info and laying it out for you.
Exactly.
So as we went through this video, three main areas really stood out to us.
Yeah, it starts off with a lot of, advice about personal health.
Right. And then the speaker goes on to share a prophecy about a spiritual awakening,
Right.
especially among young people.
And then it gets, pretty dramatic.
It does. There's a whole series of predictions about global events.
It's some big stuff.
So we're gonna unpack each of those, look closely at what the speaker is saying, and see if we can make sense of it all. Like, understand the connections the speaker is making.
And it's important to keep in mind, as we go through this, that we're really summarizing what this person says in their video.
Yeah, we're just trying to provide some clarity and context for you, our listener.
About the information that's actually in this source material.
Okay. So let's start with that personal health guidance. This is actually how the video begins. The speaker's talking about what they believe the Lord has shown them.
About diet.
Right, about diet, specifically in the context of a future plague.
And the core advice really revolves around what they call a whole foods diet.
They do?
So they list things like beef, chicken, fish, vegetables, fruit, eggs.
Okay, so the basics, like the building blocks.
Right, as the foundation of this way of eating.
Now, of course, nutritionists might have different opinions about the specifics. They'd probably emphasize balance and moderation.
For sure. But the reasoning here is pretty straightforward. The speaker really wants people to steer clear of processed foods.
Absolutely. Avoid anything with a long list of ingredients that you can't even pronounce.
There's a quote that really stuck with me. The speaker says, quote, "Brandon, they are poisoning you and you don't even know it." And then follows it up with, quote, "My people perish for lack of knowledge."
Wow. Yeah, it's a pretty strong warning against the dangers of how we produce food these days.
Definitely. And it connects with, this growing concern about what's actually in our food and how it affects our health.
Right. This whole idea of purity, like, are we really getting what we think we're getting?
Exactly. And whether this increasingly industrialized food system is actually good for us.
Okay, but the advice doesn't stop at just whole foods. The speaker also talks about supplements.
Oh, yeah. And this is where it gets really interesting.
It does. There's this strong caution against trusting any supplement company blindly.
The logic here, it kind of mirrors that concern about processed food. Like,
yeah.
Is there a lack of transparency? Could there be harmful ingredients in there?
Yeah, and are these companies more driven by profits than actual health benefits?
Right, and the speaker actually shares a personal experience. They were told to stop taking all supplements.
Interesting. So even things that seem healthy on the surface?
Could be hiding something.
Right, and it makes you think, how much do we really know about what we're putting in our bodies?
Definitely something to think about, especially given the lack of regulation in the supplement industry.
Yeah, so many products out there. How do you know which ones are good?
It's definitely a challenge for consumers.
So moving on, the speaker also stresses the importance of exercise, regular exercise.
Yeah, they suggest like 30 minutes a day or even every other day.
Right, just to get the blood flowing, to take care of your physical body, which, aligns with what most health experts recommend.
Absolutely. The key is like making it a habit.
Right, like brushing your teeth, just make it part of your routine.
Yep.
And finally, on the topic of personal health, the speaker mentions calorie intake.
They believe in keeping it under 1,500 calories.
Right, and they also bring up the concept of intermittent fasting.
which, are both strategies for managing weight and overall health.
Yeah, though, that specific calorie target, it really depends on the individual.
Absolutely. Activity level, metabolism, all those things.
Okay, so that's the personal health advice. Now, let's shift gears.
To the second big theme, this prophecy about a spiritual awakening.
Right, and there's this real sense of optimism here.
Yeah, like a real anticipation.
The speaker prophesies this authentic move of the spirit that's going to impact young people specifically.
And they describe it as this really tangible, undeniable presence of God.
Like you can't miss it.
And the speaker really wants to distinguish this from what they call charismatic flakiness.
Oh, yeah, those superficial displays of spirituality.
Right, the kind that can actually push young people away.
So what they're envisioning is something much deeper,
Like this profound weight of the tangible presence of my Shekinah glory.
leading to a holy hush and a sense of reverence in congregations.
It's presented as something undeniably real, like deeply impactful.
And it's not surprising that in uncertain times people look towards spiritual renewal.
And especially for younger generations.
You can really hear the excitement in the speaker's voice when they talk about this. They expect a huge harvest of souls among young people.
Especially those who are struggling with, drugs, what they call perversion and sexual sins.
Depression, anxiety.
Yeah, so many challenges.
And the speaker sees this upcoming movement as a direct answer to these struggles.
And they make a pretty bold prediction.
They do. They say that these young people touched by this move of the Spirit, they'll become the greatest generation that this world has ever known.
Wow. That's a powerful statement.
It is. It speaks to this belief in the power of a spiritual transformation.
Like you can literally shape a whole generation.
Right, and equip them to really change the world.
It's a huge claim.
Okay, now we get to the third part of the video, and this is where things get, well, pretty intense.
Yeah, the predicted global events.
Right. This is where the speaker shares a series of visions they claim to have received.
And it's interesting how they connect religious interpretations with what's happening in the world in geopolitics.
Oh, absolutely. And this is something you see in a lot of apocalyptic narratives. It often reflects the anxieties of the time.
For sure, this section is really detailed. It starts about 2 years before the video was made, according to the speaker.
The first vision they describe is about soldiers,
Being drafted, heading towards Europe.
which the speaker sees as a sign of escalation, like towards a World War II scenario.
And then there's this really intense spiritual element that comes in.
The speaker hears a voice saying, "The great Applin is being released upon the earth,"
And then they have this vision of a demonic entity.
being released from a pit,
And this entity, it enters the Vladimir Putin area,
leading to Putin launching an attack on Poland.
specifically the Warsaw-Belarus area.
And the speaker is very clear about the weapon used in this attack. It's not a tactical nuke. It's something new, something devastating.
They describe this massive blast zone where everything is vaporized, but the buildings are still standing.
That's a chilling image, and it's different from any kind of conventional warfare we know.
And then the speaker moves on to events in the Middle East.
According to the vision, the repercussions of this attack on Poland are huge. All of Europe gets involved in the conflict.
Turkey joins Russia, providing funding.
And Iran also aligns with Russia, and they form this alliance against Israel.
And then, to make things even more complicated, the speaker sees men with red hats marching from Syria against Israel.
And they identify this as the start of the Ezekiel 38-39 war.
Which, is this well-known prophetic passage about a future war involving Israel.
Often referred to as the Gog and Magog war.
Right. And a key detail here is that the United States doesn't get involved.
Leading to accusations of the great betrayal.
So Israel is basically left alone to fight this coalition.
Now, the speaker then shifts to a completely separate vision, this time involving China.
They describe something like a red dragon coming out of China, and it goes over America.
And then a surprise attack by China on Hawaii.
Specifically, Honolulu and the Big Island, using F-16s.
Wow, the speaker compares this to Pearl Harbor.
Like a devastating attack that causes total panic.
So many specific and unsettling details. It really makes you wonder, what's informing the speaker's interpretation of all this?
And then they try to connect these older visions to more recent events.
Like the French Prime Minister talking about supplying nuclear bombs to NATO,
Potentially to Poland.
and Putin warning that, doing that could lead to WW3.
And then, of course, the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran.
The speaker sees all this as confirmation of their earlier visions.
like the early stages of something much bigger,
They also mention a prophecy from 2022.
involving an angel,
Yeah, the angel gives a timeline, 569 days until great judgment begins.
which the speaker links to this supposed secret attack on Israel in October 2023.
Now, the speaker admits that the timing might not be exact, but they see the October event as falling within that time frame given by the angel.
They also talk about the event on August 24, 2023, where Saudi Arabia and other nations joined the BRICS nations,
Right. At first, they thought this was connected to the Iraqi dinar, but now they see it as part of these bigger economic shifts and alliances they've been talking about.
which just shows how, people interpret these events through the lens of their beliefs and predictions.
And then finally, the speaker shares this warning about the US dollar.
They say its purchasing power could drop to around 50 cents,
And they predict a major stock market crash, something like the 1930s.
triggered by, well, some major event.
The speaker sees all these visions as interconnected, like pieces of a puzzle,
Unfolding in what they believe to be the end times.
aligning with their interpretation of biblical prophecy.
So you can see how the speaker weaves all these threads together to create this grand narrative.
So as you've heard, our listener, this video covers a lot. From diet and exercise to spiritual experiences to these dramatic predictions about the future.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. It's a blend of personal guidance, spiritual anticipation, and this very specific interpretation of global events.
All within a particular religious framework.
And as always, our aim here was to help you understand the content of this source that you shared with us.
We've tried to lay out the key ideas in a clear and organized way.
And now, considering everything we've talked about, it really does raise some interesting questions.
So for you, our listener, what aspects of the speaker's message stood out to you the most?
And what further questions might you have as you consider these really significant claims about the future?
Engaging with material like this really encourages us to think critically about the information we encounter.
The different perspectives that are out there and, what it all might mean for us, both personally and globally.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
And we encourage you to keep exploring these topics and forming your own informed perspectives.